If someone had told me a year ago that 6 years of love could collapse over a necklace, I would have laughed. I'm not laughing now. My name's Evan Ross. I'm 36 and I live in Seattle. I work in IT. Lots of code, coffee, and quiet nights. Nothing flashy. Stability was my comfort zone. I thought that steadiness was what love was built on. For 6 years, my boyfriend Tyler Grant and I shared everything: rent, chores, lazy Sundays, streaming shows half finished because one of us always fell asleep first. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. At least, I thought it was. The first crack showed up in a jewelry store window, a white gold chain with a small diamond glinting under perfect lighting. Tyler stopped walking, eyes fixed. "3 grand isn't that much," he said casually. "You could get it for me. It's an investment in my image." I laughed, thought he was kidding, but he wasn't. I told him, "Ty, we have rent, car insurance, bills. That necklace costs a month of breathing." He just stared back, voice flat. "You never believe in me, do you?" That line hit harder than I expected, because it wasn't about the necklace, it was about control, about seeing how far he could push before I'd break. The weird part? I almost said yes. That's what love does when you're used to fixing things instead of walking away. Have you ever been guilt-tripped by someone you love, made to feel stingy, selfish, or ungrateful just because you said no? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you want more real stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Back then, I didn't realize I was already halfway out of my own story. Tyler had started following lifestyle influencers, guys our age showing off watches worth our savings and condos that looked like movie sets. He'd watch them at night, volume up, muttering about manifesting abundance. I'd joke, "Our landlord finally fixed the bathroom fan. That's my abundance." He'd stop laughing after a while. Soon the jokes turned into jabs. "Why are we still driving that car? Why can't we go somewhere nice for once?" Each question landed like a small bruise, and every time I tried to explain the math, he called it negativity. The night of the necklace argument, I remember stirring pasta on the stove, heart thudding, realizing the person behind me wasn't the man I built a life with. He was a stranger, measuring my love in carats. I told myself it was just stress. Everyone fights about money. But deep down, I knew something else had shifted. He looked at me across the table that night, phone face down beside his plate, and said, "If you don't believe in my vision, maybe you don't belong in my future." And right there, under the hum of the kitchen light, I felt it. The first quiet snap of something breaking that might never be fixed again. I didn't know it yet, but that sentence would be the last time he held any power over me. When people hear about breakups, they always ask when the fighting started. But the truth is, the damage usually begins long before the shouting. It starts quietly, in the moments where you give a little more than you should and convince yourself that love means it's worth it. When Tyler and I first moved in together, we didn't have much. A small apartment in Capitol Hill, mismatched furniture, a couch we bought off Craigslist that smelled faintly like someone else's life. But we were proud of it. We built our routines from scratch: Sunday grocery runs, shared calendars, arguments over whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. Back then, Tyler used to thank me for everything. If I cooked, he noticed. If I picked up an extra shift, he'd squeeze my hand and say, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I believed that meant partnership. I was the planner between us, not because I wanted control, but because someone had to keep the lights on. I tracked bills, savings, insurance. I knew how long we could survive if one of us lost our job. I called it security. He used to call it being smart. But slowly, that word changed. It happened in small ways. Tyler would come home frustrated after work, talking about coworkers with nicer shoes, managers with better apartments. I listened. I reassured him. I reminded him that we were stable, that stability mattered. At first, he agreed. Then social media entered the room. He started following these men who filmed themselves stepping out of luxury cars, talking about mindset and knowing your worth. Tyler watched them like sermons. I'd be washing dishes while he scrolled, phone glowing in the dark. "Look at this guy. he'd say. "He's younger than me and already owns a condo." I'd smile and say, "We own peace. That counts too." Eventually, my answers stopped satisfying him. The first time he asked me to help upgrade his wardrobe, I didn't hesitate. "A nicer jacket for work," he said. "It'll help me get noticed." I believed him. I wanted to support him. I told myself it was temporary. So I picked up freelance tech work at night, fixed servers for a small marketing firm, answered tickets after dinner. I was tired, but I felt useful, like I was investing in us. But every time I reached one goal, another appeared. The jacket wasn't enough. Now it was shoes, then a watch, then dinners at places where the menu didn't list prices. And somehow, every upgrade was framed the same way. "I just want you to feel like you're on my side." If I hesitated, he looked disappointed. Not angry, just wounded. That hurt more, so I kept saying yes, or at least I kept trying to. I told myself this was what love looked like: compromise, patience, sacrifice. I didn't realize I was the only one sacrificing. What I didn't say out loud was how small I was starting to feel, how my carefulness was being recast as fear, how my stability was becoming an inconvenience. Tyler stopped thanking me. He started expecting. I remember one night, months before the necklace, lying awake next to him, listening to his breathing. I wondered when I'd last felt truly appreciated. Not needed, appreciated. I brushed the thought away. 6 years together meant something. It had to. But that was the lie I kept telling myself, that time invested was proof of safety. I didn't yet understand that love can quietly turn into debt, paid by the one who stays silent the longest. Anger doesn't always arrive loud. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, disguised as confusion, then settles into your chest once the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. With Tyler, the shift was subtle, until it wasn't. The requests stopped sounding like requests. They became expectations. If I questioned a purchase, he didn't argue numbers anymore. He questioned me, my mindset, my support, my loyalty. He started using words like growth and vision, as if disagreeing with him meant I was small, afraid, or holding him back. "You're always thinking short term," he told me one night after I suggested we skip an expensive dinner. "I'm thinking survival," I said. He shook his head. "See, that's the problem. You don't think big." That sentence stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because it revealed something ugly. To him, thinking big meant spending money we didn't have so he could feel impressive to people who didn't know him. And suddenly, I wasn't his partner anymore. I was an obstacle. The criticism started slipping out in front of others, friends, coworkers, little jokes at my expense. "Evan's the budget police," he'd laugh. "He still checks his bank app like it's a weather alert." People laughed. I smiled. Inside, something burned. Then came the comparisons. Other partners believe in their men. Other couples don't live like they're afraid of the future. Other guys don't have to beg for support. Beg. That word hit me hard, because I wasn't withholding love. I was protecting our life. But Tyler had rewritten the story in his head. In his version, I was the villain, standing between him and the luxury life he thought he deserved. The necklace brought everything into focus. When he dragged me into that jewelry store, I saw how sure he was, not hopeful, entitled, like the decision had already been made and I was just there to authorize it. $3,200, I said, staring at the tag. "That's not crazy," he replied instantly. "You make good money." You, not we. I reminded him about the rent increase, the car repair, the savings we were building for something real. His jaw tightened. "You always do this," he snapped. "You turn everything into a lecture." "I'm not lecturing, I'm being responsible." He leaned closer, lowering his voice like he was delivering a truth I needed to hear. "Or maybe you just don't like spending money on me." The anger surged then, hot, sharp, undeniable. "That's not fair," I said. He shrugged. "It's how it feels." There it was, the manipulation laid bare. My boundaries were now emotional weapons against me. Saying no meant I didn't love him enough, didn't believe enough, didn't deserve him. That night at dinner, when he finally said it, "If you won't invest in me, why should I stay?" Something inside me snapped cleanly in two. I looked at him across the table, at the man I'd paid bills with, planned holidays with, trusted with my future, and I saw calculation where warmth used to be. "You're holding our relationship hostage over a necklace," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. Instead, he stood up, grabbed his keys, and said, "Think about what you're throwing away." As if love were a transaction, as if I were the one being reckless. When the door closed behind him, the air felt charged, like the air before a storm. I sat there, fists clenched, replaying the last year in my head. The new clothes I hadn't questioned, the nights he came home late with vague explanations, the way his phone never left his hand anymore. That's when the anger sharpened into something else. Clarity. This wasn't about money. It was about power, about how much of myself I was willing to hand over just to keep him comfortable. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was angry that I'd almost lost myself. I wish I could say that anger carried me through the night, that it made me strong. It didn't. Once Tyler left, once the door shut and the echo faded, anger drained out of me like air from a punctured tire. What remained was something heavier. Silence. I sat at the kitchen table long after my food went cold, staring at nothing. My thoughts moved slowly, like they were wading through water. Every argument from the past year replayed itself, no longer isolated moments, but pieces of a single picture I hadn't wanted to see. His phone, always face down. The sudden work dinners. The clothes that appeared without explanation. The way he flinched when I mentioned savings. I told myself I was being paranoid, that relationships go through phases, that love requires trust, not audits. That lie died that night. I stood up and walked into the bedroom, not with a plan, just with a dull, aching need to understand. I opened the closet first, pushed aside jackets that weren't mine. That's when I saw the shopping bags stuffed into the back corner, crumpled like trash. High-end labels, tags still attached. My chest tightened as I pulled them out one by one. An $800 jacket, sneakers that cost more than 3 months of our internet bill, a backpack that nearly matched our car insurance payment. I sat down on the bed, the room tilting slightly. Tyler's salary hadn't changed, mine hadn't suddenly doubled, the math didn't work. My hands shook as I opened my laptop. I hesitated for a moment before logging into our joint account. I remember thinking, if I'm wrong, I'll hate myself for this. But if I was right, I needed to know. The numbers loaded. 6 months ago, our savings account had just under $20,000. I'd been proud of that number. It represented discipline, a future, something solid. The current balance sat at a little over $8,000. I stared at it, unblinking, waiting for it to change. It didn't. I clicked into the transaction history. Transfers began appearing immediately, steady, methodical. 500 here, 750 there, 1,000, over and over again. Each one moved quietly into Tyler's personal account. More than $12,000 gone. My throat closed. I felt nauseous, like I'd missed a step on a staircase, and my body was still catching up. I scrolled through dates, my pulse roaring in my ears. Then I remembered something else. His old paper planner, the one he kept before switching to digital calendars. I found it in the nightstand drawer. I almost put it back. Then I opened it. At first, it looked normal. Work shifts, birthdays. Then, 4 months ago, a new pattern appeared. Initials written neatly beside times and locations. VP Coffee, VP Bar, VP Hotel. Always during hours he claimed to be working late. I closed the planner slowly, like it might explode if I moved too fast. Everything lined up: the money, the purchases, the absences. This wasn't carelessness. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a rough patch. It was a system. I slid down against the side of the bed and sat on the floor, my knees pulled to my chest. I didn't cry right away. I felt hollow, like the version of my life I'd believed in had been quietly replaced while I wasn't looking. What hurt the most wasn't the money. It was the realization that he'd been living a second life, financed by the trust I'd given him. The necklace suddenly felt irrelevant, a distraction, a test, and I had failed, not by saying no, but by staying silent for so long. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I only knew one thing with painful clarity. The life I thought I had was already gone, and I was standing alone in the wreckage, trying to remember how long it had been since I'd last chosen myself. Something strange happens when you hit the bottom hard enough. At first, there's panic, then grief, but eventually, if you sit still long enough, clarity arrives. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. That night, sitting on the bedroom floor surrounded by evidence of a life I didn't recognize anymore, I realized something important. Crying wouldn't change the facts. Anger wouldn't either, but information would. I stood up, wiped my face, and took a breath. Long, measured, the kind you take before handling an emergency. I started moving through the apartment with purpose. First, documents: my birth certificate, social security card, work contracts, anything that tied my name to my identity. I placed them neatly into my backpack, hands steady now. Next, my laptop and backup drives. Years of work, personal files, photos, budgets. I didn't rush, I didn't hesitate, I just secured what mattered. Then I packed a suitcase. Not everything, just enough for a few days. Clothes I felt comfortable in, shoes I could walk far in if I needed to. I wasn't running, I was repositioning. By the time Tyler came home from work the next day, I was already gone. I checked into a small hotel 15 minutes away. Nothing fancy, clean, quiet, safe. When the door closed behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. I didn't block Tyler immediately. I wanted to see what he'd do when the illusion broke. While he was still at work, I returned to the apartment briefly. I laid out every designer item I'd found: jackets, shoes, bags, on the bed like an exhibit. Then I printed key pages from our banking history: the transfers, the dates, the amounts. I placed them carefully among the clothes. Finally, I opened his planner to the most obvious page, the one marked VP Hotel Bar. I set it right in the center. No yelling, no note filled with accusations, just truth, arranged neatly. On the kitchen counter, I left a single sentence: "I'll be staying elsewhere. We can talk when you're ready to be honest." Then I left. That evening, my phone started lighting up. "Where are you? What did you do to the bedroom? Why aren't you answering me?" I let the messages stack up, not to punish him, but because for the first time, I wasn't obligated to respond on his schedule. When I finally answered his call, my voice surprised even me. Calm, neutral, clear. He exploded immediately. Accusations, anger, panic. "You went through my stuff." "Our stuff," I corrected gently. "We share accounts, remember?" Silence followed, thick and heavy. Then I said it, slowly. "I know about the money. I know about the transfers, and I know about VP." His breath caught. I could hear it. He tried to explain, to minimize, to reframe, but I wasn't arguing anymore. I was documenting. I told him I'd be back the next day, that I wanted him out by noon, that I had records, evidence, and options he wouldn't like if he forced my hand. For the first time in months, Tyler didn't sound confident. He sounded small. When I hung up, my hands shook, but not from fear, from release. I lay back on the hotel bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, realizing something profound. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was restoring balance. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I slept. The next day, I returned to the apartment just before noon. I didn't rush. I didn't rehearse speeches in my head. I felt oddly calm, Like everything that needed to be said had already been said by the evidence waiting inside. Tyler was there. So was his older sister, Megan. Of course she was. She'd always been the family fixer, the one who stepped in when Tyler's charm stopped working. I opened the door, keeping my voice steady. "Your things are packed." Tyler looked exhausted. Red eyes, wrinkled clothes. He started talking immediately, words tumbling over each other. Apologies, explanations, promises. Megan cut in. "Evan, this is extreme. Couples go through rough patches." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just gestured toward the bedroom. "Take a look." They did. The room spoke for me. Designer clothes laid out neatly, bank statements placed on top, dates highlighted, amounts circled, the planner open to the page he'd forgotten to hide. Megan's expression shifted first. Confusion, then calculation, then something close to disbelief. Tyler stared at the bed like he was seeing it for the first time. "I can explain," he said weakly. I nodded. "I'm sure you can, but explanations don't erase patterns." He tried again, said it wasn't physical, said he felt pressured, said he never meant to hurt me. "That's not the defense you think it is," I replied quietly. Megan crossed her arms. "You can't just kick him out, he's on the lease." "I'm aware," I said. "I'm also aware of every transfer from our joint savings to his personal account, over $12,000, without my consent." She blinked. "I have timestamps, statements, and a lawyer who's already reviewed them." That did it. The room went silent. No more arguing, no more moral lectures, just reality settling in. Tyler looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time I didn't see confidence or entitlement. I saw fear. "7 years," he whispered. "You're really ending it like this?" I met his eyes. "You ended it months ago. I'm just acknowledging it now." They carried his boxes out one by one. No shouting, no dramatic final words, just the sound of cardboard scraping against the floor and footsteps fading down the hallway. When Tyler came back for the last box, he hesitated at the door. "I didn't fall out of love with you," he said softly. I didn't flinch. "You fell in love with attention." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left to say. I closed the door and locked it. When the latch clicked into place, my hands shook, but it wasn't weakness. It was relief. Over the next few weeks, the consequences unfolded without my involvement. Tyler tried to push back legally. My lawyer responded with facts. He backed down fast. He returned part of the money, not all of it, but enough to avoid a courtroom he knew he'd lose in. Word spread. At work, he missed meetings, then shifts, then he was let go. The woman he'd been seeing disappeared once the money and status dried up. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Justice didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly, methodically, like gravity finally doing its job. Meanwhile, my life began to stabilize in ways I hadn't expected. Without constant tension, my thoughts felt clearer. I slept through the night. I stopped bracing myself for the next argument. One afternoon, while unpacking boxes in my new apartment, I realized something that made me laugh out loud. I hadn't won. I'd been freed, and that felt better than any revenge ever could. 2 months after Tyler moved out, my life barely resembled the one I'd been clinging to. Not because it was bigger or shinier, but because it was quieter. And for the first time in a long while, that quiet didn't feel empty. It felt honest. I downsized, a smaller apartment closer to work, sunlight in the mornings, no echo of someone else's expectations hanging in the air. I furnished it slowly, one chair, one lamp, one plant at a time. Each purchase felt intentional, nothing to impress anyone, just things that worked. There's a strange phase after chaos leaves your life. At first, you keep waiting for it to come back. Your body stays alert, like it forgot how to relax. Then one day, without warning, you wake up and realize the tension is gone. You're breathing normally again. That's when healing actually begins. I stopped checking my bank app obsessively. I cooked dinners I liked. I slept through the night. At work, I finally accepted a promotion that had been hovering on the horizon for months. Turns out, when you're not constantly managing someone else's instability, your own potential has room to show up. One Thursday evening, I ran into Tyler at a grocery store near my new place. He looked smaller somehow. Tired eyes, cracked phone screen, a hoodie that didn't quite fit the version of himself he used to sell. When he saw me, his face lit up with something desperate. Hope, maybe? I didn't stop walking. I didn't rush either. I just passed him like he was any other person picking out produce. I didn't look back when he said my name. That wasn't cruelty. It was closure. Later that night, curled up on my couch with takeout, I did something I hadn't done since everything fell apart. I looked up the necklace, the one that had started all of this. White gold, diamond pendant, same price. Scrolling down, I noticed a review. Purchased 3 weeks before our fight. Reviewer, Vanessa P. The truth landed instantly. Tyler hadn't wanted a necklace. He'd wanted two. One from her, one from me. Two women financing one illusion of worth. Validation from both sides. Proof that he could extract admiration and money at the same time. It was never about jewelry. It was about building a persona on borrowed resources. I closed the browser tab gently, like placing the last piece into a puzzle I didn't need to keep looking at. I don't miss Tyler. I miss the version of him I thought existed, before attention became currency and honesty became optional. But that version was a story I told myself, not the man who lived in my home. Here's the thing no one tells you about endings. Sometimes they aren't cliffs. Sometimes they're elevators. You step out on a higher floor and wonder why you ever stayed below. I'm 36. I'm starting over, not from nothing, but from clarity. I know what I deserve now. A partner who values trust, who doesn't confuse love with access, who doesn't treat stability like something to exploit. And the $3,200 necklace I never bought? It saved me from years, maybe decades of quiet erosion. Best return on a non-investment I've ever made.